You are watching Cable 10, Aurora, Illinois Community Access Channel.
From the city of St. Louis, you're listening to the Don't Push Pause podcast with your hosts, Justin Johnson and Lindsay Reber.
Party on, Lindsay.
Party on, Justin.
I'm super excited to talk about Wayne's World, and it's been a fun few weeks revisiting this movie. I'd actually seen it maybe only a year prior to us getting ready for this episode, but
I thought you watched this like every month of your life.
yeah, I should. I'd probably have a better life.
I think I'm just going to start the first of every month watching Wayne's World. It really has perked my spirits up.
Just the very first 5 minutes of this movie is hilarious.
It really does start out with a bang, and that was very intentional from director Penelope Spheris, too.
Well, there's a lot to get into with Wayne's World. We're going to take you through the process of the Wayne Campbell character and how it developed into an SNL skit, and then how it became a two-man show, and then the success that was Wayne's World, the movie.
Of course, we'll go behind the scenes a little bit of the production, talk about the type of comedy, what people love about it so much, the director that I already mentioned, of course, the music, the reception, sequel.
We'll probably touch on those numerous SNL movies, the hits and the misses.
Of course, we love talking about the cast, so we will be hitting on the main players and every supporting face in this movie, too.
Yeah, a lot of great comedic efforts in this movie.
And for picks of the week, let's see. Justin, what did you go with this week?
This was a tough one because there were so many. I had so many ideas of different movies to connect to Wayne's World, but I actually decided to go with SNL connected cast members, and I chose Airheads with Adam Sandler, Steve Buscemi, and Brendan Fraser. And it has that musical connection too. It's like about music in the same sort of sense that Wayne's World is.
Oh, yeah. I used to watch this movie a lot. I felt very close to the Adam Sandler character for some reason in this movie. I feel like that would be me in the movie.
Yeah, he kind of makes this movie, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for. That, like, if I were in the movie, it would, I would make it the best thing about it. That's what I was going for.
What was your pick of the week?
Mine was a movie that a lot of people, I feel, scoff at when you bring up, but upon a revisit, man, I watched this thing 3 times, and I loved every second of it. And that was the next Saturday Night Live movie to come out after Wayne's World, 1993's Coneheads.
You've got me real curious about this movie. I've actually never seen it, but I saw that it is on Netflix, so I might have to hit that up this week.
I'd say it's another feel-good type of positive movie.
Well, of course, always we'll round things out with our Murray moment. But before we get into our first clip from Wayne's World, Lindsay, can you give us a brief lowdown on what this movie is about?
Fine, I'll get it. Great.
Do it.
Cool, fine.
Just do it. Say it.
Fine, I will then. Great. Cool. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm just sitting here waiting for you. I'm already rolling, so.
And end scene. Plugged into the local music scene, 2 metalheads, Wayne and Garth, have been plugging away producing an entertainment public access show called Wayne's World. But when a flashy TV producer sees their show, he immediately wants to commercialize it, make Wayne and Garth sell out, take over, and make a schmoozy play for Wayne's girlfriend, who's a total mega babe with rock star potential.
That was great.
I tried to bring it all in there because Sandra's such a big part of the movie. You have to include her in the synopsis, you know?
You totally do. Well, let's go to our first clip from Wayne's World. We'll come back. We'll get into this fun-filled movie.
Sometimes I wish I could boldly go where no man's gone before. But I'll probably stay in Aurora. What are you thinking about?
Cassandra. She's a fox. In France, she would be called La Renarde, and she would be hunted with only her cunning to protect her.
She's a babe.
She's a robo-babe. In Latin, she would be called Babia Majora.
If she were a president, she'd be Abraham Lincoln. Did you ever find Bugs Bunny attractive when he'd put on a dress and play a girl bunny?
No. No.
Neither did I. I was just asking.
So when we started researching Wayne's World, I thought that Wayne's World was pretty much just created solely as a sketch for SNL, and then based off the success of that, they decided to make it into a movie. I really had no idea that the character Wayne Campbell that Mike Myers created had started much, much, much earlier than even before he was on SNL.
Yeah, like so much earlier. Try talking about 11, 12 years old when he was living in Canada. So he was a metalhead teenager in the Toronto suburbs and grew up in a showbiz kind of family. And in a family where they stayed up, late to watch SNL and SCTV, and his parents encouraged him to watch Peter Sellers movies. Like they appreciated comedy in his household. So yeah, the character of Wayne Campbell did come from little Mike Myers. He was in some television commercials around, ever since he was 12 years old, round about there. And just right after high school, he was accepted to the touring company of Second City Toronto. So that's just kind of crazy. Shortly after that, he moved to the UK, ended up being a founding member of the Comedy Store Players, which was another improv group out of London. And then in '86, he came back to Canada, was doing the main stage of Second City Toronto, and Wayne became a character on the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company TV show called It's Only Rock and Roll, and it was called the Wayne's Power Minute. So in the mid-'80s, another thing that Wayne was on was a city TV out of Canada called City Limits. He also appeared on Much Music, and I knew Much Music because I was an MTV kid, and that's the Canadian MTV. So Wayne was actually out there. Wayne was in existence, but not, on a mega stardom scale like he ended up being on Saturday Night Live. So around about 1988, Mike had just done the 15th anniversary show for Second City Toronto, and comedians Dave Foley, Martin Short, and Pam Thomas all called up Lorne Michaels and said, hey man, you got to look at this Mike Myers kid. I think it's time to draft up another Second City person to join the cast of SNL. And that's what Lorne did. He called Mike, offered him a job to join the 88-89 cast. It was the 13th season of Saturday Night Live. And so Mike joined mid-season. And just like that, his life kind of changed, but he did join a cast that was already, they already had their groove going. So Mike was kind of the, newbie. And even though he wasn't green to the showbiz industry, it certainly was, a jarring thing to be kind of thrown into. There's a lot of things I don't know about behind the scenes of SNL, but they certainly encourage you, the more characters and everything that you have creatively, they want all of that. So you got to bring it out. And the more ideas that you have, characters that you have, half of them are going to get pitched out the window, probably more than half are going to get pitched out the window. But if you get a good one and you stick with it, it could turn into something massive. And that is kind of what happened with Wayne Campbell. So Mike's living in New York and discovers the public access show called The Robin Bird Show. And probably only if you've spent some time in New York or have lived there do you know what The Robin Bird Show is. That's a whole other podcast, but was an amazing cable access show that I had the privilege of watching numerous times. Anyway, he got inspired by watching that and thinking about what if Wayne had a cable access show. So he pitches the idea to Lorne. Lorne's on board with it, but says, okay, so this idea is too, niche driven and you need to have a sidekick. So I get that you're metalhead and, you have this cable access show, but we need a foil. We need somebody to help you out in this skit. And this is where Dana Carvey comes in. Now, Dana had joined the cast back in '86. So he was a seasoned guy. People knew who he was. He was easily a bigger star than Mike Myers. But Mike indeed asked him to basically be a sidekick. And the only guidance he really gave him was saying, okay, so Garth worships Wayne. That's about it. And in some ways, that seems pretty freeing. I'm sure that there's a lot more behind this that would be impossible for us to know unless we were actually in the writer's room to know how all of this got sorted out. But Dana certainly had some creative freedom with the character of Garth. Like, Garth was based upon his brother. Like, the way he talks, this nerdy kind of fix-it guy. But a lot of what made up Garth strictly, totally came from Dana. And one thing that Lorne Michaels always encouraged them to do was to kind of have this, not necessarily push and pull, but kind of competing for airtime. And that creates comedy. That kind of chaos helps create the comedy that happens on every episode of Wayne's World that was in SNL, and certainly in the movie, definitely carried over into the movie. Now, without going totally into just talking about Wayne's World sketches, there were 19 episodes, not counting ones in much, much later seasons that ran from 89 to 94. And when you put it in the idea of thinking, that's really only like 4.5 seasons, it's still a hell of a lot of episodes for a recurring character, especially on SNL, when sometimes those recurring characters don't last that long. And when it came to the movie, it really only took Mike Myers going to Lorne Michaels and saying, so I think we should do a Wayne's World movie. And Lorne Michaels just said yes.
And once it was decided that the Wayne's World movie was a go, there was the next task of deciding who would direct such a movie. They wanted somebody who was familiar with the genre music that Wayne and Garth listened to, like a hip director. And Lorne Michaels had a longtime friend and associate in Penelope Spheres, and she was given the shot at directing Wayne's World. Penelope Spheres had directed a 3-part documentary entitled The Decline of Western Civilization, Parts 1, 2, and 3. The films covered different moments in time in the Los Angeles youth and music scene. The first taking place in the early 80s. It covered the punk scene. The second Decline film took place in the mid and late 80s, and it covered the burgeoning heavy metal scene in Los Angeles. The last Decline film was much more serious. It covered homelessness of youth and gutter punk kids living in Los Angeles in the late 90s. But in between the first two Decline of Western Civilizations, she did do several independent and somewhat studio finance features with Suburbia, which is a very grim tale of disenfranchised punk youth, followed by The Boys Next Door, which was another very grim tale of 2 young and handsome serial killers on the run. And she followed that up with a much more humorous tone, though bleak at times, and silly dudes. In my mind, it was, she was a bold choice because she had done some very, very grim and bleak movies to, tackle something so silly and goofy like Wayne's World. But she was actually like a really fantastic choice. And she was definitely a director who gave a lot of input, and some of the humor that is in Wayne's World came from ideas, that she incorporated and helped Mike Myers with.
Certainly one aspect that she brought to it was a sense of realness and legitimacy. Not that Mike Myers and Dana Carvey didn't know like the metal scene, but she really knew it. She lived it. She was it. So bringing her to this movie in some ways grounded the film and made it to where it's still going to be silly and goofy, but it wasn't going to lose any audience. It was still going to encompass the people that love this particular style of music or just music in general. It's a non-alienating type of feel. And I think you can watch this as a person who appreciates that genre of music or just like music in general, but you also don't have to be someone that was or is absorbed by the music scene. And I think she definitely added that sensibility to it.
Yeah, and there's certainly some of her touches in Wayne's World, like the use of somewhat fantasy sequences, but not just outright fantasy, like the Foxy Lady sequence where Dana Carvey's like sort of miming the words. And then as well as some of the dark sort of undertones, like the Ed O'Neill character, these moments that they are funny, but there's like a very, very dark tone to it.
There is, yeah.
And, she handles that stuff really, really well. And I think, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like keeping Wayne's World grounded, because it definitely is a movie that could fly off the rails. You know, I think of a lot of 80s movies where I go back and watch and I think like, gosh, there's like half of this movie, 50% of this movie is like all fantasy sequences, you know, and they can be cute at times, but you know, it kind of gets old, especially on a rewatch. You're like, okay, I got to get through this like fourth dream fantasy sequence that this character's having, you know, and it's like, and then you know, you add a couple montages to that and you only have about 20% of story and character. So I think it was like a wise choice to find somebody who really wasn't an all-out comedy director, someone who had done more gritty, realistic stuff, but also someone who could help somebody like Mike Myers say, hey, that's funny, or hey, this is working, because he had really only done short comedy sketch stuff. He hadn't really been in the world of feature films early on in his life. You know, he had done, like you said, a few commercials and stuff like that, but he hadn't been, you know, did a 30-day shoot, 40-day shoot, being on the movie set. So I think it was a really wise choice to have somebody that was relatable, who was grounded, and who could help coax him through the stages of working on that kind of schedule and in that kind of realm.
It wasn't necessarily the easiest thing for Penelope Spheris to step into an already existing, well-known sketch like Wayne's World. And she was a fan of Saturday Night Live, of course, but also of the Wayne's World sketches. But when you step in to something that is written by, you know, not only Mike Myers, but you also have Bonnie and Terry Turner, two other writers who put out this script, you have kind of a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And not only writers, but also, you know, Dana Carvey's got an opinion. He's been doing this character for, at this point, what would it be, you know, 3 years. And to be the director directing them, and there's a lot of ideas that needed to be sorted out. So one of the ways she chose to deal with having so many cooks in the kitchen was to actually shoot some scenes 4 different ways. Her way, Mike's way, Dana's way, the writer's way, or, you know, 2 or 3 of those incarnations. And then when she would get in the editing room, or when it came for editing time, she had options to choose from. In some ways that can seem maddening, I think, but it also depends on how your brain works. And if Lorne Michaels wanted her to do this film because he knew that she could be quick, decisive, and knew exactly what she wanted, and just from seeing interviews with the woman, she's very confident, and not in an arrogant way. Like, she's not just going to go ahead with something because it's her way or the highway. She's going to go with what she feels is best for the situation. And so I feel that if she wanted to go in doing that and allowed that to happen, that was the best way to keep everybody happy at the time. And then also knowing at the end of the day, she's the one that's going to have final say pretty much over everything.
Yeah, I think she had a great way of thinking when Dana Carvey would keep pitching her ideas, and she'd say, if you can do it funnier in under 10 seconds, we can put it in the movie. You know, and that was like her way of, I'll let you do what you want, but we can't like dick around with this all day long. You know, you just got to like do it funny and do it quickly, and we'll probably put it in the movie if it works. And probably the biggest evidence of this is from our first clip where Mike and Dana are sitting on top of the car. And when you hear Mike Myers' laughter after Dana Carvey asks him the question about Bugs Bunny, they were both so slap happy, and Mike Myers' reaction is just totally natural. And that's, you know, Penelope Spheris said, hey, let's keep that in the movie. That was great. She kind of just let that play out, even though they were tired and it wasn't really something that was meant to be in the movie. It's great because the way it's framed, it frames them as like these two, you really see them as like two best buds. I like that they go back to that same setup whenever Garth is really upset with Wayne, and they kind of have it out.
Yeah.
I do like that that little moment where they're on a car kind of like bookends their friendship a little bit.
That is one thing that becomes very obvious on a rewatch of Wayne's World is, sure, there's a lot of humor and funny bits in this, but the friendship between Wayne and Garth, I mean, is really endearing. And sure, we have some goofiness and some cartoony type moments, not literal cartoons, but just, you know, comical moments. It comes down to a story about friendship. And whether that is articulated through the idea of breaking from the storyline to do a Laverne and Shirley montage of Wayne and Garth doing the opening credits of Laverne and Shirley, or it's done in another way, just showing their bonding or showing them getting in a fight and making up. And this movie really is about friendship. And I don't think that I ever realized the heart that's really behind the whole thing, the whole story, when I was watching this, when I was 15.
I also never realized how much I love Garth. I know this is
Yeah.
like Wayne's movie and it's Wayne's World and it's his TV show, but I just can't picture this movie existing without Garth. And Garth, to me, he gets the best scenes and the best laughs.
You know what's funny, Justin? One thing I learned about this was not that there is competition necessarily, but Mike was one of the primary writers in this, and Dana noticed he was getting written out of some scenes that he was in previously, or his ideas weren't being included. And he actually kind of like tapped out. In his mind, he tapped out officially and was like, I'm done with this movie. And it was 3 weeks before they were due to shoot, and no one believed him that he was actually tapping out of the movie. In Dana's mind, he really was. But after coming back and talking about it, and being allowed to do some ad-libbing scenes and just kind of like forcing his way into a lot of these scenes. Some of those scenes that we see are completely ad-libbed by Dana Carvey and weren't in the script. And that's not to say all of them weren't, but Dana really seemed like he had to make sure Garth had a voice in this. And I think Penelope Spheris really pushed for that too. From what I can tell, whenever she talks about Garth, like, she really loves that character. And I mean, I do too. He's so sweet. And he always messes up he always says the wrong thing in a situation. And I don't know. I identify with Garth in a lot of ways.
I respect Dana Carvey for sticking up for his right to have some creative like input in the movie. Because some of his, like I said, some of his scenes, I love when it pulls away from Dana Carvey. Like, the style of the movie is very strange because they're breaking the fourth wall and we're talking to the audience. But I love that we even go further than that because we're watching Wayne deal with some situation. Like mainly it's usually when he's talking to Benjamin, the Rob Lowe character that's wanting to produce Wayne's World and pay them for it. Garth is untrusting of people. He trusts Wayne and that's about it. And, he has his own alone time where he's like going through the apartment and the camera leaves Wayne and we're just now following Garth and he's talking to us. And to me, it gives the movie a little bit like a second layer, this whole other idea of like a character who's supposed to be kind of goofy and naive, but at the same time, he's also like really, really smart. And I think the movie, they do a good balance of that, of showing that, he can be socially awkward and say the wrong thing, but then later, he can do all these different like technical audiovisual, gymnastics to help, save the day.
Yeah, he's actually a genius in a lot of ways. The stepping out of the straightforward narrative, but still following the story is one of my favorite aspects of Wayne's World. And I know that breaking the fourth wall, you and I, Justin, sometimes we can be on board with that. And then when we're not, we'll be like, that ruined the entire movie. I can't even handle that it was even included in it, but not in Wayne's World. And the same thing could be said for anything that they do as far as parody goes. The whole absurd scene of the product placement, it's friggin' hilarious. And it is so clearly, doing a shtick, and it's not necessarily set up like a sketch or something that's just inserted, but it is breaking that fourth wall when it's directly addressing the audience in this way to kind of satirize how we do commercialize and have all of these pop culture references. I love that aspect of Wayne's World. I think it's something that, if done incorrectly, could ruin something, but not in this case. It's very intelligently and sarcastically done. I think that's why it works.
When they do the parodies in these sort of satirical moments where they don't do it to death, they don't do it like, hey, we're going to do this until it's funny because we've done it so many times. It's like they're sprinkled throughout the movie, so this is a style, this is the universe in which we're living in here, expect it. We could do a Laverne and Shirley parody, the Terminator 2 parody, but they're not going to do like an entire scene. It's like quick little moments and then a clever way to jump out of it. Like they're doing the whole Laverne and Shirley intro, and then they're like, what are we doing? We've got backstage passes to Alice Cooper, and then they jump out of the parody thing. And to me, that's like a clever way to do it, not just do a parody because we can do a parody, and it's appropriate if you're doing a movie like Scary Movie or something like that. But for this type of movie, I think that they do it just enough to where it plays well, but again, like I said, a clever way to segue out of those, so that it's just not this like hard cut, or that you're just like, okay, this movie's just so random. It does have a beginning, middle, and end, and things are somewhat cohesive.
And also, as far as the satirical kind of aspect of this movie, the whole idea of this male camaraderie and kind of lightweight metalheads, it's done with such love. The joke that comes up a couple of times, the friend that keeps saying, I love you, man. No, like, I love you, man. And then by the end, that joke finally has a payoff where it, again, is directly addressing the camera, saying, I love you too, man. And I've come to understand that two men can have platonic love. Yeah. Like these, you spend the entire movie, we have these like little things that we don't necessarily, they're funny,
right?
But there is an eventual payoff for pretty much everything, except that hand, that robotic hand that Garth for some reason hits with a hammer, and we don't really know why. There is a story behind that. I can save that for later, but there really aren't too many moments that come up that don't have a payoff.
Yeah, and even the ending, I was trying to remember how I felt about the ending, and on the rewatch, because it is a bizarre thing to have like these alternate endings. I think the only movie I can think of that has done this other than Clue, the movie, where they have like 3 different endings played one on top of the other. I really like that. It's a funny way to end it, and they do it just enough. They don't drag it out for very long. It's pretty satisfying.
The first thing I think of is Clue, too. And with Clue, while they're all very entertaining, they go on for a second. Yeah, they go on for quite a while. And it almost feels like the end of Wayne's World, like they happen too quickly. But that's also the comedic speed pretty much of the whole movie. I don't really feel like it drags too much. If anything, it is this nice balance between having a narrative of a story that we care about. We actually care what happens to Wayne and Garth and to Wayne's World, the show, and Cassandra. We care about everything that's happening in this. But at the same time, there's also this other constant current of chaos underneath everything, that everything could just change at a moment's notice. And yeah, like some of the things that we've been bringing up obviously show that these little chaotic elements that can get inserted into it, but at the same time we still have a very straightforward story that's happening the whole time.
The script is smart in a lot of ways in that it is a very simple story, but the story that is there isn't just there to facilitate the jokes. They spend a little bit of time, like just the whole idea of them moving their cable access television show from Wayne's actual basement to this studio where things are set up, and all the problems that come with that, with bringing his small crew into working in a professional studio with other professional crew guys, and them having to work together, and then the creative differences that come with that. They're playing all those problems out like how they would in reality in a non-comedy movie. It gives you something to cling to. It's like, okay, we want this to be based in reality in a script, and let's work good jokes into that reality. I always find that to be the sign of a smart comedic script, where even if the story's simple, it's not just a throwaway story and everything that happens is just like you're bored until like the jokes land.
It doesn't really happen in Wayne's World. And in some ways it feels like that could almost be like a departure from what we think would normally happen in a comedy like this. But if there's one thing that Lorne Michaels is kind of known for in comedy, is doing what you don't expect, or the thing that when you think it's going to go here, but it's going to take you over here. And I think having a comedy like this with all of these, I don't even just want to say jokes, but with all these like setups happening and a story that is completely propelling through it, it is kind of part of that entire idea of departing from what you expect normal, teen comedy to do. A safe teen comedy, too. Wouldn't you say that? I mean, this is PG-13, but man, it is a fairly clean movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could pass as a PG, especially for today's standards. But I also think, too, just finally, we should move on to the next clip. But finally, watching this movie in a 2020 lens, it plays really well. There's nothing really here that is kind of obscene or offensive by today's standards, and it's still it's funny without going for low blows. And yeah, like you said, it's a very clean comedy. I feel like you could watch this with the whole family and enjoy it, but I think that there's plenty here for kids and adults alike.
Yeah, surprisingly, the only thing that comes up that could be remotely offensive, Wayne actually calls himself out in a silent, awkward way. And it's when he meets Cassandra for the first time after her first show. I'm not going to bring it up. You just watch the movie. Let's go to the next clip.
All right, we'll be right back.
Tell me, when that first show is over, will you still love me when I'm an incredibly humongoid giant star?
Yeah.
Will you still love me when I'm in my hanging out with Ravi Shankar phase?
Yeah.
Will you still love me when I'm in my carbohydrate, sequin jumpsuit, young girls in white cotton panties, waking up in a pool of your own vomit, bloated, purple, dead on a toilet phase?
Yeah.
Okay, party, bonus.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Anthony.
Who's Anthony? Who's Anthony?
My drummer.
Okay.
As always, our favorite things to talk about in this podcast is the cast, and Wayne's World is no different. Such a great ensemble cast and a great comedic cast to boot.
We already kind of touched on Mike Myers and Dana Carvey, but man, you know who owes so much to this movie are the two other like main stars, that being Rob Lowe and Tia Carrere, who play Benjamin Oliver, the jerk TV producer, and Cassandra, the mega babe who Wayne falls in love with.
I get why Wayne is so obsessed with her. She's just like the perfect equal parts badass talent. She's in a band, super smart, and also doesn't seem to be like full of herself either. Is like very grounded.
And she certainly had that confidence kind of walking into this part. As she said in one interview, what other Asian American actress are they going to find all these qualities in? Like, that's me. And good luck finding somebody else, but it's going to be me because I fit this role. And I don't think that it's just Wayne, showing how in love with her immediately that he is. Like, she is really just a kick-ass woman and pulls it off so well. Even I fell for Cassandra watching this all over again.
Not that she hasn't had a great career, but you would be expecting her to show up in like so many big movies, and she did for like 1 or 2 years. She was in True Lies, but then she's
the bad person, right, in True Lies.
Yeah, but then kind of like the rest of the 90s, you didn't really see her too much. And I listened to a recent interview. She was on the podcast I listened to, and she was saying how she took what she could get, and she definitely felt like Wayne's World catapulted her into like a couple of really big movies. But she said that her most proud work is her recent role in RuPaul's AJ and the Queen, which I haven't seen yet, but she said she's loving that, she's able to play like a different character, like an offbeat character, and that show's kind of taken off a little bit. And so she's been coming up lately in interviews and podcasts. So it's awesome to see that she's having like sort of like a resurgence in her career.
That AJ and the Queen show has been in my Netflix queue for a second. I really do need to get to it. Tia Carrere has done a fair amount of TV. I think that's probably where I've seen her most. And I'm glad, if anything, that Wayne's World catapulted her to extreme visibility, because she is a very talented actor. And no matter what she does and no matter what she gets hired for, she's always going to kill it and everything. You know who else owes a lot to Wayne's World is Rob Lowe, because this kind of came at a low point in his career after a little scandal you might have heard about in his life. So he hosted SNL, and Lorne Michaels, it just kind of came to him that, this guy's a solid actor. He's a hunk. He's very good at comedy and could pull his weight hosting SNL. And so he contacted Penelope Spheris and said, who's going to be perfect for this jerk of a role who can pull off comedy and being a total dick? Rob Lowe.
Man, he is so perfect in this movie. And I'm most familiar with him now through Parks and Rec, which I love. I hadn't really thought about Wayne's World and made the connection, even because it had been in a while since I'd seen Wayne's World. And as soon as he came on the screen in Wayne's World, I was just like, oh God, this is like a segue into his character from Parks and Rec. This is like where that comedy bit started. Even some of his like cadence and his pauses are very evident early on of his comedic timing.
He'll even straight up say that he owes his career in comedy to Lorne Michaels and Mike Myers. And he is really good at it too. I mean, he's a great actor in a lot of ways. But to pull off comedy didn't seem like it was something that came naturally to him, or maybe just something that he didn't realize that he could do until his turn on SNL and Wayne's World.
And man, it weirds me out how he's not aging.
He's aging backwards.
He's really one of the lucky people on the planet who just appears to be getting more handsome as they get older.
He also seems like he really needs to dress in drag to me. He looks like he would make a very hot woman. I don't know. Even from Wayne's World to today, he is aging backwards. I don't know what it is. Rob Lowe, please contact us. Let us know what your secret is.
We've also got one of our favorite character actors who's been in many, many movies that we've talked about here on the podcast, and that's none other than Brian Doyle Murray.
You gotta love little Brian Murray. Whenever he pops up in anything, he's always going to be great. And not just in a movie with his brother, he's certainly been in his fair share, usually playing a dick sometimes, or just kind of sarcastic. I love that in Wayne's World, he's kind of dopey and clueless. He doesn't really play like the normal jerk that he does. Like there's a hint of that, but that's Rob Lowe's area in this movie. He's kind of clueless, but he's not stupid.
He's the butt of the jokes versus in other movies, he's the bully, but they don't.
Yes.
And also him just doing the rap is like it's so cringy, but like it cracks me up every time.
And Brian's been a longtime friend, of course, of Lorne Michaels and Saturday Night Live. He's Second City player, SNL cast member, and writer. So obviously, it seems more like with a Saturday Night Live movie, if you're going to write a part, you're probably going to go, who could pull this off? Brian Doyle Murray. And he does expertly.
I think someone who doesn't get all the credit they deserve for Wayne's World, who he has like a really large amount of screen time, is Kurt Fuller, who we love in Ghostbusters too. But he's actually the character who has like the biggest character arc in all of the whole movie.
Yeah, he does. He certainly does.
He starts out being Rob Lowe's like secondhand man to like, helping take over their Wayne and Garth, their creative control. And an excruciatingly funny scene where Garth dismantles his flashlight as if it were like a gun.
It is like he just wipes away his brainwashing that Benjamin's put him under.
That's one of my favorites.
It's a pretty darn funny scene and a fun little crossover too. Maybe you already know this, Justin, since you brought up Ghostbusters 2, but both Kurt Fuller and Brian Doyle Murray were in Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah. And it's funny that we brought up Clue earlier, considering Colleen Camp was in Clue and plays a really great but tiny role as Noah Vanderhoff's wife, the babe wife.
Yeah, that part where Michael DeLuise just says your wife's a total babe. It's like a record scratch moment that could go really south, but because Brian is such a kind of just, all right, thanks, you're right. And Colleen Camp's reaction is out of such shock, but she loves it. Just her reaction is amazing.
When him saying, do I scare you? And she's like, no. And he's like, do you want me to? It's just strange. And he's like holding the camera in front of him. Like,
that might be a moment that would turn me. If someone said that, I'd be like, oh, interesting. You're forthright. Okay. Also, Colleen Camp, we just talked about her in the previous episode, Election.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, turning up in so many movies. Love Colleen Camp whenever she shows up in something. Also, Ed O'Neill. Come on, let's give a little slow clap for Ed O'Neill's scenes in this movie.
Ed O'Neill is sort of like the character that is like very relatable, and this sort of, he's working this, it's like, this is Glenn. He works
the world on fire.
Wayne, is just like knows that he's just like works there day. And it's like, this is Glenn. He works here 24/7. I recommend the sugar cakes.
Yeah, everything about Ed O'Neill in this movie,
just so depressed and like
depressed, but just like grizzled, but still like has an edge, and he's not gonna ever move past where he is, but he's accepted it.
There's a lot of comedians in this cast, but one really super funny performance by Laura Flynn Boyle, who really usually doesn't play the comedic roles, so this was kind of like a different role for her.
Yeah, Stacy just never got the idea that Wayne broke up with her. She's just the not even crazy ex-girlfriend, just like she's not giving up on Wayne. In every interaction with Stacy and Wayne, you're just waiting for whatever the silly thing that she's going to do, and Wayne's like, "Are you mental? Like, what's wrong with you? I broke up with you like 2 months ago." Every time that Lara Flynn Boyle pops up in this movie, it's a guaranteed good laugh.
And I like that she plays like sort of the crazy ex, like over the top, because she followed this movie up with a movie that has a very special place in my heart, The Temp. I love my 90s my 90s thrillers of the crazy babysitter, the crazy temp, the crazy bus driver infiltrating somebody's life and ruining it.
Man, I forgot that she was in The Temp. That's right.
The Temp is one of the crazier ones because she just starts straight up killing people, not even like manipulating people's lives. She's just like right off the bat, like, yeah, I'm just going to kill everybody this guy knows.
Lara Flynn Boyle she's a great actor in general, but her comedic timing, I think, is something that isn't really talked about too much. It's in Happiness. She's a really, truly great performer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give it up to Robert Patrick for appearing in this movie for under 30 seconds, reprising his role from Terminator 2. I mean, he didn't have to do that, It's in why would somebody want to really, like I'm sure if he wasn't a fan of Wayne's World and like, what am I doing? You're going to have me do this like bit part.
And Robert Patrick had been around for a second, but certainly he knew, Terminator 2 is what got his face totally recognized. He was smart to do this in Wayne's World.
But it does make for a nice surprise because you're like, whoa, they really got the real guy, So it makes the joke work on multiple levels.
Yes. And of course, how could we forget sweet little Chris Farley, who pops up in this for just a short amount, just a little bit part. And he had already been in the cast of SNL, but Lauren Michaels called up Penelope Spheris and said, look, we've got this guy. He's a great kid. Do you just have like a small role you can put him in? And that's how Chris Farley ended up in Wayne's World. So cute.
In a tiny role by Ione Skye as well, playing Rob Lowe's girlfriend in the beginning, who introduces him to Wayne's World. She's always been one of those actors where even if they're on screen for just a tiny moment, they just seem so real. She just has a way to emit that so easily, even in such a tiny role where she's just talking about the show and like, oh, this is hilarious. You've never seen these guys. And it sucks you into the movie immediately and into, Rob Lowe's idea of like, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is different. And great way to intro the movie.
It was very smart to do that because you're right. There's something about Ione Skye that draws you right in. And since that is the first thing that we see, we're set up with the movie with what we know that's familiar, and that is Wayne's basement. We know that from watching SNL, and then we immediately see this woman that we can't help but look at, and she's like, just her presence brings us in, and she thinks this show is cool. Of course, it's like immediately engaging. It just, the film grabs you right at the very beginning. So slow clap for Ione Skye on that one too. One more engaging woman. How could we leave out Dream Woman, played by Donna Dixon? I don't know if Donna Dixon was, at the time, if people would have been able to pick her out of a lineup. I mean, she was a model, and she's been Dan Aykroyd's wife for many a year. But I loved her in Spies Like Us. Think what you will of that movie, but Donna Dixon being the dream woman in Wayne's World, it makes sense to me because she kind of is a dream woman.
Yeah. And I will think what I will about Spies Like Us.
I'm not going to comment.
Yeah. I won't either.
I own it, so that's all I'm going to say.
Well, no, and this being a very music heavy movie, it only makes sense that they would have real life musicians in the movie. And I think used really well. Probably, and I've said this like 10 times now in this episode, like the funniest scene or the funniest moment, which just now is making me realize how many freaking funny moments and scenes are in this movie. It's just almost nonstop. But we've got Meatloaf playing the doorman for the club that Wayne and Garth attend, with the great line of who's playing, Wayne's asking who's on the bill tonight. And he's like, the Shitty Beatles, are they any good? And he's like, they suck. Then it's not just a clever name. And of course, Alice Cooper appearing as himself, where they get backstage. But some of the best humor comes in the backstage hangout with Alice Cooper, where Wayne and Garth are just so excited, and they think, this guy's the biggest partier on the planet, and he's like this very soft-spoken, intelligent, like calm, demeanored while everyone's hanging out, and they're talking about, they just played a show in Milwaukee, and they're talking about the origins of Milwaukee, and it makes for such a great scene, and goes back to what you're saying earlier with Lorne Michaels' idea of taking something that you think's going to happen, like in your mind, you're like, oh, they're going to party all night with Alice Cooper, and that's the whole setup for this. And then it just like goes in the complete opposite direction, but is even funnier than anything that, could have happened if it was a big hotel party scene, which, we've already seen a million times in movies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, we have to talk about the music. Bringing up Meatloaf and Alice Cooper, this movie is so music heavy and music centered, pretty much responsible for the resurgence and popularity of Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen.
Yeah, and I'll admit, this movie came out when I was 14 years old, and I had never heard Bohemian Rhapsody or knew what that was, that it was a Queen song or anything, till I saw Wayne's World. And immediately had to track down, like, what is this song? Like, like it had just came out. Of course, my mom's like, yeah, that song was around when I was a teenager. But it's interesting, because it brought that song to a whole new generation, like Stand By Me did with Benny King's title track and Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman.
I also think that Monster did that with Journey's Don't Stop Believin'. No one listened to that song until Monster came out.
You really, you're really fighting for that theory.
I really am. Or The Sopranos. It was either one. It was around the same time. Whatever. Yes, I will go to my grave fighting for that one.
All right. And of course, we've got, like I talked about earlier, Foxy Lady, the Jimi Hendrix song, played to perfection with Garth, and all of the music that Cassandra Tia Carrere does, who, she supplies her own vocals, and those songs are fantastic and redundant to say, but like, of course, if you have a band playing in the movie, you want the music to be really good and catchy and something that's going to be interesting, that's going to draw the audience in. We've talked about it with That Thing You Do and with Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains, but you hear Tia Carrere play and you're like, oh man, this band is awesome. And then later on, when they do their live set for Mr. Big, when Wayne's trying to help her like make it big to get over the next hump of stardom, it's just such a great song.
My favorite musical moment in Wayne's World is perfect for the moment, for capturing the feeling, for everything, and comedy, is both times that Dreamweaver's used in it, when Wayne sees Cassandra playing, and it's Cassandra's band playing, right? And she's rocking, and it's amazing. And Wayne's just basically seeing hearts in his eyes, and Dreamweaver starts playing.
It just starts
with
drowning out her song.
with these like little starbursts happening around her. It's so perfect. And also a little Penelope Spheris crossover where she said she originally did the music video for that song. I don't think it's the one that's used, but she was originally involved in that.
That's pretty wild.
It is. What a crossover. And of course, Dreamweaver, Gary Wright, that song always rolls. And whether it's the music or the comedy or the performances, there's something in this movie that is for everyone. And it's certainly, when the film was released, even test audiences freaked out over it. And I don't think that anyone, including Lauren Michaels, Mike Myers, anyone thought that the reception was going to be just as big as it was.
Yeah, this was just a smash hit. I mean, not a sleeper success, like out of the gate smash hit. Teens, adults alike, people going to see this movie multiple times in the theater. It garnering not only some critical acclaim and tons of money at the box office, but also incorporating vernacular into pop culture with excellent and and just things that felt real to Wayne's universe and somehow worked in our universe as well.
Excuse me? I think you're totally right about that.
Baking powder? Did you say $5,000?
As if. And one thing that Penelope Spheris brought up in talking about the success of this movie is that it should be said that it already had kind of a built-in audience. Like, people love Wayne's World on SNL. Like I said before, the skit had been running for over 4 years. So they were going to have teenagers going to see this movie, but then they were going to have their siblings, and then their parents are going to be curious. And then pretty much everyone's talking about this and saying catchphrases from the movie. You couldn't help but want to know what all the hype was about. And the movie looked innocent enough that it wasn't going to be something that was offensive.
Well, and certainly with the success of Wayne's World, as with any movie, the immediate thought from a studio is, how fast can we get a sequel out? If you are a fan of Wayne's World, I'm certain you've probably seen Wayne's World 2, and I'm certain it could be argued, but there seems to be a great difference between the two movies as far as like humor and story and style and substance. A lot of things are different, I guess. And
so pretty much like the whole movie's different, right?
But Wayne's World 2 was a rushed project. They were trying to get something out. They knew there was a limited amount of time. Like anytime something like gets catapulted into pop culture, it's going to, the movie is still good and will hold up, but the trends of it being popular fades quickly. And so Mike Myers started work on a sequel with a whole different idea than what happened in Wayne's World, but he based it off of something that the studio didn't have the rights to. And they were pretty angry about that. And they said, you need to get another story in the works that we don't have to buy rights to and get copyrights for, or else we're going to cancel this whole thing. And so the Wayne's World 2 script was kind of cranked out pretty fast. There also was the lack of Penelope Spheris in the picture. She and Mike Myers didn't really gel too well in the first movie. Mike Myers, has been known to be sort of I don't know if you would say the word micromanager, but he's very like creative control and his way first, and then he'll take a few ideas, but they didn't really work too well. And so there's a claim from her that he would convince the studio to use a different director. And I think that really hurt Wayne's World 2. I think that she brought a lot of the style and coolness to the original Wayne's World. And I think a lot of that is lacking in Wayne's World 2. Now, me saying all this sounds like I hate Wayne's World 2, and that's not the case. I love that Wayne's World 2 exists. I love that there's another movie where I get to watch these characters coexist that's longer than a 6 or 7 minute SNL sketch.
Sure. Yes, you're completely right. I love that Mike Myers was forced to do a rewrite on this, that Sherry Lansing basically said, I'm going to have you castrated if you don't fix your idea that we don't own anyway, because I think the original idea had something to do with Wayne and Garth forming their own country that was off the coast or something of the US. Like, I don't know. It was just a little too fantastical, and not to say, I mean, there's a lot of fantasy elements in Wayne's World, of course, but however this idea came up of the point being Wayne and Garth putting on a festival, yeah, that makes complete sense. That it exists based on a complete fantasy and a dream, that's some willing suspension of disbelief. But that is the whole idea of Wayne's World in a lot of ways. So I really enjoy Wayne's World 2. I like the first one better, but I'm certainly happy that the sequel exists the way it is.
And I do think Wayne's World 2 plays better now than it did when it came out, especially with the idea, because everything in Wayne's World 2 is like built up toward the Wayne Stock Music Festival that they're putting on. And when the movie came out, there really wasn't a lot of, there's a million music festivals now, but at the time Wayne's World 2 came out, that wasn't something that was so much, I think, in the mainstream. And so now the movie I think it plays a little bit better. The reference is stronger because, you're like, oh yeah, naturally they're going to do a music festival. There's like a music festival in every city now. That's like a major festival. I don't know. It plays a little more fun to me now. I think I'm just in the same way I am with Ghostbusters 2. I think I'm just more appreciative of these movies because it's like an extension of the original where I get to see these characters exist again.
Yeah, I can identify with that feeling. I'll never say anything negative about Ghostbusters 2. You know that, though.
I know you won't, and I will never say anything negative about it in your presence.
No, you can. We can totally have a dialogue about it.
You say that now, and then you don't text me for like 3 days. Sorry I missed your last 4 texts. I was watching Ghostbusters 2, that movie that you fucking hate.
You are aware that, like, Sigourney Weaver would never do a shitty movie, right? So I guess, I don't know, like, think about that. So whatever, it's fine. So I think we both can say that we like Wayne's World 2, glad it exists. And I think as a bookend to the beginning of Wayne's World, I'm glad that it's out there. I really hope another Wayne's World doesn't happen. And kind of going into SNL movies, that makes me think a little bit how they did with Blues Brothers 2000. Like, Wayne's World was the second SNL movie, the first being the Blues Brothers. And Blues Brothers 2000 came out, and I mean, you really had to like the Blues Brothers in order to be down with Blues Brothers 2000. I mean, you were missing one of the brothers, and whatever. Think what you will about it. Again, I'm glad that it's out there. I'm not going to talk smack on it. I'm glad that it exists. But certainly SNL had a string of movies that I feel like, depending on your humor, I think all of them are funny in their own particular ways. Some are better than others. But I think you're going to find with each one of these, somebody out there is going to say, oh my God, It's Pat is like one of my favorite movies. But yet it's one of the ones that performed the worst out of all of the SNL movies. Same thing with like Stuart Smalley, Stuart Saves His Family. You can hate that character, and I know people that do, and I also know people that love that character.
I really feel like Stuart Saves His Family needs to be reevaluated.
I'm all about it. We should just reevaluate both of those movies. I feel like It's Pat might be banned, like, in every country, probably. It's too offensive, I would imagine, at this point.
I don't know that It's Pat's going to play well to any audience right now.
I'm sorry. It's just Julia Sweeney's performance of Pat. I recognize why it's not okay, but it's just Julia Sweeney. Sorry. Pat's a funny character. Anyway, moving on. You can think what you want of all of these movies, and certainly I'm going to talk about one of those, that being Coneheads, that came after Wayne's World. But even like Night at the Roxbury did much better than some of these other movies at the box office. Again, some people love those characters, other people hate them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it really comes down to your tolerance of the characters in the sketch. Like Night at the Roxbury was not a sketch that really ever, when that one came on, it never really spoke to me as much as like the Molly Shannon, Mary Catherine character.
Superstar.
Yeah, and to me, that movie, I think it works. It's funny. It doesn't wear out its welcome, and I think that there was enough material of that character was like quirky enough to like expand her world. Same thing with Ladies Man. I'll say I saw Ladies Man not knowing that was an SNL sketch, and I thought the movie was hilarious.
Yeah, I think that's one that deserves another look too. I want to know when Stefan is going to get his own movie. Is that going to happen?
It's shocking that they never did a Stefan movie. Probably Bill Hader was just like, yeah, I don't want to do a whole.
Yeah, we know how MacGruber went down. We can't do it.
And MacGruber's the only SNL movie that I haven't seen other than Coneheads. But I don't know that sketch, to be honest. There's, I've got some gaps in my SNL lineage watching.
MacGruber was never one of my favorite recurring sketches. However, anything that Kristen Wiig does, she's gonna shine a piece of shit into gold. You know what I mean? Like she's. But I think you can have someone that's gonna make something wonderful, but then all of the pieces aren't gonna be there to make it what it is. But for the most part, I'm really glad that SNL even tried to do something like this with these string of movies. I don't know. I'm interested to see if they will put out another one. It's been 10 years since MacGruber.
I would say if there was any sketch that they could pull out for a feature that I'd be the most down with, it would be Whiskers Are We.
Oh my God, the Whiskers Are We ladies. Yeah, that'd be pretty good.
I think you could do a lot with that. I think there's a lot of,
That's the thing, is you have to think about the characters and what you can do with them. And some are going to be one-trick ponies. Like I love the alien abduction lady that Kate McKinnon does. Do I think that there's a whole movie in that? No, not at all. But there's got to be something in here where, if anything, what if you were to have a movie with the Whiskers Are We ladies and work other SNL cast members in? I mean, we're just spitballing here. Lauren, if you're listening, give us a call. We'll give you some ideas.
We'll forward you our notes from the show.
I'm sure Lauren's been taking notes the entire podcast.
But really, I think, looking back at all the SNL movies that have come out, I think that they've gotten a kind of a bad rap. I agree. I think you could go back and revisit any number of these movies, and they're not going to be. They're going to be better than a lot of really bad comedy movies that came out in the 90s. There's some positive things about each and every one of these. Maybe I can't say that about Blues Brothers 2000, but I digress.
There was just love. The guys involved in that had nothing but love. So I can't.
It feels more of a tribute movie than it does a SNL movie.
Yes, exactly. I totally agree with that.
But all this talk about SNL movies, it's really got me, itching to see Coneheads, so I can finally close that one out as far as my SNL 90s movies that I haven't seen.
If there's one, I can't wait to talk about it in the picks of the week.
Well, I think now is the perfect time to do that. Let's stop with Wayne's World. Let's hear about the Coneheads.
I stand behind every pick of the week I've ever done, and it really hasn't been until this one that I've gotten some scoffs at this consideration. And like I said before, it's been over 15 years since I've seen it, and I'm going to make a solid statement that Coneheads was, and even more so nowadays, one of the most underrated comedies of the 90s. If you're not already aware, actor, writer, producer, and original not ready for primetime player Dan Aykroyd conjured up the recurring Coneheads characters for SNL. The original Coneheads, Aykroyd, Jane Curtin, and Lorraine Newman lasted from 77 to 79, excluding later appearances. And they were a ratings guarantee, kind of like Wayne's World. The Coneheads' humor was accessible and fairly innocent for any audience, from highbrow to the stoner crowd. Where the SNL sketches had us witnessing the Coneheads interacting with humans in various situations at home, this 1993 film finds the family in much more of a straightforward narrative. Primat and Beldar Conehead, played by Curtin and Aykroyd, are sent on a scouting mission to Earth and are shot down by the military. When they're informed that no one from their planet Remulac will be able to rescue them in 7 Zerls, which is presumably a very, very long time, the Coneheads must assimilate to American life by way of maintaining an income, buying a house, having a kid, having friends, and because they are technically, quote, illegal aliens, the family must hide from the human authority figures. Just straight off the bat, looking at this movie almost 30 years later, pre-9/11, pre-Trump's border wall to Mexico, the Coneheads feels strangely prophetic. I know, kind of weird, right? And I don't just mean the electric shock collars that are presented as government border security either. It's overt without being preachy, but does something really crafty. No matter what your political beliefs, the way in which the Coneheads family is persecuted or judged comes only from the obviously ignorant folks or law enforcement. Everyone else in their lives, neighbors, friends, any stranger they meet at the supermarket, they accept their pointy-headed, shaped community members' differences with very few questions. "We come from France," is the excuse given for their un-American appearance and behaviors. The Coneheads, who are now with a teenager, Connie, want nothing more than to achieve contentment and stability, earn an honest living, and follow the idealized notion of the typical American dream. They're called illegal aliens by law enforcement when they are just straight up aliens from another planet. Since we see their forwardness and honesty in their living style, it's nearly impossible to feel anything but love for this family, especially when they have law enforcement breathing down their necks again after a few years of blending in. I can't help but feel love for this movie, whether because of their needless, unwanted persecution or the heart of the film, best articulated during the montage of Connie Conehead's childhood over the song Kodachrome by Paul Simon, also another longtime friend of SNL. Aykroyd and Curtin are at the tip-top of their game as Beldar and Primat. Certainly no one else could have had their commitment to making these characters so believable and lovable. And though Lorraine Newman had to be recast as their daughter Connie, due to, her looking like an adult more than a teenager, Michelle Burke gives a very sweet, perfect, all-American interpretation of the character, though Newman does later make an appearance as the family's aunt. And she's not the only comedian to pop up in this movie. Co-starring roles go to Chris Farley, David Spade, Michael McKean, Dave Thomas, and a whole litany of other comedians. Adam Sandler, Phil Hartman, Sinbad, Jan Hooks. I mean, I have a list here, but Ellen DeGeneres is in it with one line. It's just seriously like, if you were a comedian or on SNL at the time, why weren't you in this movie is how it feels. And while I now see the message under the movie as being about acceptance and how everyone wants pretty much the same things in life, the humor from the original SNL sketches is very present, just further developed. Though Connie has all-American girl sensibilities, Beldar and Primat still maintain their bizarre diet of carbo-protein intake, and their quick and robotic walk, constant wide-eyedness, a really weird, strange laugh, their dialect, cadence of speech, and hilariously literal interpretation and observation of human culture, food, rephrasing of commonly used human phrases, just really anything. They're incredibly forward while being inoffensively intrusive, what's honestly kind of lacking in most of us blunt skulls, as they call humans. Like I said, unless you're a jerk, this movie paints most humans as accepting, even if they don't understand. Remember when tolerance was the catchphrase of the day? That's what Coneheads is positively trying to demonstrate. Whether you can hang with this departure from reality, attempting to fit into a believable universe, is up to you, but it's a pretty dang enjoyable movie. In the end, the Coneheads is about love, commitment, community, and acceptance over intolerance. Like I said in the beginning, I watched this movie 3 times over the course of 2 weeks and was charmed every time. If you were ever one of those eye rollers at this movie, when's the last time you tried watching it? Like 93, 94? Try it again. It's innocent, surprisingly intelligent humor, and has this bizarre style of comedy from an era of SNL that'll never be achieved again. And I truly got to give it up to Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin for this one. Like, if it weren't for them, I can't imagine it without them.
Yeah, it's still crazy to me that I've not seen this movie yet. I might watch that tonight. I might just stay up a little bit later and watch it after this episode.
The other thing about it is the humor is so quick. It's very, I don't know if it's just the way that Beldar and Primat talk, that it's very quick, but the cuts are very quick, but it doesn't feel rushed at all. It just feels like a very quickly paced movie, which I think you need for something like this.
Who's the director on Coneheads?
Steve Barron. You remember him from when he did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah, he directed this one.
All right. Well, that makes me even more excited.
Right? Yeah, you liked that movie.
I do. Better than Spies Like Us.
Oh, man. I've watched it recently.
Yeah.
It's just got a nostalgic charm for
The
me.
first 5 minutes are great.
Yeah. When they're just meeting each other and cheating on the test,
Yeah.
wonderful. At the camp, wonderful.
Yeah.
Past that, it's questionable. Donna Dixon, great.
Yeah.
Doctor.
I'll agree with all that.
Doctor. You only know that if you know that movie. Justin, please, I really, really need to hear about your pick of the week. Please remind me of the gloriousness that is Airheads.
I'll do just that. So I picked Airheads because I felt, again, like it was had a little bit to do with music and had cast member from SNL. It's a really fun movie. It's directed by Michael Lehman, who did one of our past episodes that we talked about with Heathers. And this movie is much, much lighter than Heathers. It's almost as if you wouldn't have known he was the director, because it doesn't have a lot of the dark humor that Heathers had, but it is a lot of fun. It is a very entertaining movie. It's about three hapless musicians, heavy metal heads, played by Adam Sandler, Steve Buscemi, and Brendan Fraser. They're really down on their luck. Their girlfriends are leaving them. They're not getting very far in their jobs, and they're low on rent, and they're really bummed because they can't break through into the music industry. They get a bonkers idea to hold up a radio station and force the DJ to play their demo tape in hopes that maybe it'll spark some sort of record deal. And what starts out as sort of a goofy plan leads to them barging in. They have water guns that they've put pepper juice in. No one knows that these guns are fake. And eventually it causes a media sensation because there's cops out front, there's protesters. It's being broadcast on the news 24/7. But they don't really have a really good plan. They're, like the title suggests, they're a bunch of airheads. And so they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. The majority of the movie takes place in the radio station, and there's some good laughs there. There's a lot of fun. It's a short movie, but the big win here in this movie is Adam Sandler. This was a movie that he made before he hit it big with Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore, and he pretty much steals every scene of these in. The majority of the movie, there is some satire mixed in the same kind of way that Wayne's World did, the music industry and kind of how radio stations are forced to play particular kinds of music, how DJs are kind of burnt out. And the last 20 minutes of the movie, it gets a little bit rocky because it's kind of unsure of like what they're going for. Are they going for satire? Or are they going for like sort of the happy Hollywood ending? And that's what they go for, a happy Hollywood ending. But it is very satisfying. This is one of those movies that I think is like the pinnacle of like, you're sitting down on a Saturday night and you just want something to crack open a beer and have fun and watch a movie to get a few laughs and be entertained. I love a good popcorn flick. I love very intelligent movies. I love thrillers. I love horror movies, but I also really love this kind of movie. It's not as smart as Wayne's World and certainly not as funny, but I think that it's in that same vein. And if you're looking for a good time, I recommend Airheads.
I do really enjoy Airheads. It's been a second since I've seen it, but for some reason it was a movie I watched a lot in the 90s, like one that I had taped off HBO or something like that. They look like a legit band. I've always thought that.
They do look like a legit band. The wigs and stuff aren't as obnoxious as you would think they would be. And there's some sincerity, I think, in their performances. It's not a straightforward like goofball comedy.
It is really worthwhile.
So those are our picks of the week: Airheads and Coneheads. A very heady selection. Check those out if you want a few laughs. But let's keep it moving. Here's your Murray moment.
Chicks dig me because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal.
You gonna come and shake my monkey tree again?
Oh, what does that old queen know? She didn't even show.
Hey, this is so scrumptious. Is this hand shucked?
The flowing robes, the grace, all striking.
That was fun.
I tell you, sometimes I start these Murray moments in one spot and end up so far from the beginning like a Simpsons episode, I even surprise myself. So please, ride this wave that is my mind. SNL's created some legendary duos over its 45 years of existence. As much as I love Wayne and Garth, my wholehearted favorite duo is Billy and the beloved Gilda Radner as Todd and Lisa, otherwise known as the Nerds. Wayne's World may have been in a whopping 19 episodes, but Todd and Lisa turned in 13 sketches in fewer seasons. And you may not think that there's much of a crossover here, but I promise I'll bring us back to Wayne's World. If you're not familiar with the nerd sketches, Todd LaBonta and Lisa Loopner were a lovable little nerdy couple, enjoying each other's company, having fun, and occasionally being a little risque. I played a nerd, Billy said in the book Life from New York by James Andrew Miller and Tom Shales. Gilda played a nerd, and I was going after her personally, whatever it was. I made her laugh. Even nerds had stupid humor. Billy and Gilda were a legendarily on and off, secret, not so secret couple in real life. Whether they were on or off during that week of rehearsals, as a viewer, you saw the magic that would happen between the two. Todd and Lisa became a medium for Gilda and Billy to work something through on television, said Rosie Schuster, a writer on SNL who did all of the Todd and Lisa sketches. You could probably track what was going on by seeing how they related to each other on the air. And in the same Life from New York book, which is a Bible to me, Billy talks about the magic that was created in those nerd sketches and how it served Gilda perfectly because as Lisa Loopner, she could get away with laughing inside her character. She was a fantastic laugher, Billy said. I never enjoyed making anyone laugh more than her. Never. Over the years, he's mentioned this a few times. And you could think that a newer SNL generation might not have ever known Gilda professionally, but when Mike Myers was 10, he became enthralled with Gilda on the set of a 4-day shoot of a Canadian commercial they did together. I thought she was awesome, funny, cool, and beautiful. I cried on the last day of the commercial because I had fallen so in love with her, Mike said of the experience. A fact which he was ruthlessly teased about by his brothers, especially after they saw Gilda on some no-name show at the time called Saturday Night Live. Mike was captivated by her on screen, and in seeing her on TV, turned to the rest of the people in the room and said, "Someday I'll be on this show." And everyone just laughed at him because, that thought's pretty ludicrous. Obviously, that came true. In January, February of '89, Mike Myers joined the cast of Saturday Night Live, and it was in May of the same year when Gilda broke the hearts of so many. Personally, me, Lindsay, I remember exactly where I was when I found out Gilda passed away, and as a fan, how it made me feel, and I didn't even know her. Ovarian cancer's a real bitch. My blood ran cold, Mike said of the Saturday he heard about Gilda, the day he was due to go live later that night. And that evening, SNL was hosted by a longtime friend of the show, Steve Martin. And in the opening monologue, and I ask you to look up this video, you can see the pain that Steve's holding back as he pays tribute to Gilda with a sketch they did in '78 called Dancing in the Dark. If you know it, you know it. It's only dancing, no words, and it's glorious comedy. I know I took us down a dark path you probably weren't expecting, but here's where I steer us back around to something Todd and Lisa related, to Wayne's World, to that same episode in 1978 with Steve and Gilda dancing. Now, Todd and Lisa had their fair share of catchphrases, from noogies to Band-Aids for mosquito bites to something being so funny I forgot to laugh. Todd and Lisa popularized some seriously memorable vernacular. Obviously, the same can be said for Wayne's World. But guess what? From what I can surmise, the first recorded sarcastic usage of the phrase "not" was not from Wayne's World. It was from a Todd and Lisa sketch from this very same episode in '78, which Steve Martin hosted, did the Dancing in the Dark with Gilda, and where he was the recurring arch nemesis of Billy's Todd LaBonta, where he was always trying to steal away Lisa Loopner's affection. I know this is so minor, and maybe only a few other people have caught this over the years, but when I was going back and watching all the Todd and Lisa sketches, this moment stood out to me as a, hey, wait a second, when exactly did that phrase come around? If anyone out there wants to, actually me on this, go ahead. I'm sure you'll find the same bare bones research I did. So I'm pretty secure in just always enjoying just thinking about not coming from a Todd and Lisa sketch way before Wayne's World. See, I brought it back around. You look hard enough, you can find all the connections between people throughout the years on Saturday Night Live. This avenue of Billy Murray and Mike Myers' appreciation for funny woman and heartbreaker Gilda Radner was how I chose to do this one. Ask me another day and maybe I'll give you another Murray moment. But this one just ended up being more fun.
Actually, I think I like that little factoid.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, and I thought that I was really reaching when I heard that, and then I was like, meh, whatever. This is what I'm doing right now. I'm researching, and I found like 3 other people that that noticed this, but at least I'm not alone.
I totally thought it was from Wayne's World.
And you know what? Maybe it maybe it is, but it came before Wayne's World. Whether it was Todd and Lisa that originated it, it was certainly the first thing where I can see it used in comedy, especially on television. And is it a coincidence that it's both Saturday Night Live? I don't know. I kind of think not.
I like that. Thanks for that Murray moment.
Of course.
Do we have any, did you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up on Wayne's World? I had one or two minor little things.
Yeah, mine are pretty minor. I mean, do you want me to go ahead because I'm the woman, or do you want to go ahead with this?
I mean, I wasn't even going to suggest that, but I mean, go ahead, go for it. Madam.
I really only had like two little things to bring up, which are the same idea, and that was two scenes in which Mike Myers was not a fan. Evidently, he was not a fan of the Robert Patrick cameo from Terminator 2, where he comes up to the side of the car in character from Terminator 2 and is like, "Have you seen this, boy?" Which is hilarious. I don't know why he wasn't into it. It seemed like it was either it was going to be over the heads of people many years later, or it just felt completely out of left field. I really liked it, but I think the one that I just don't agree with him on, and is probably in the top 3 of favorite moments in all of Wayne's World for me, is when Lara Flynn Boyle is riding by on her bike and she's got like the neck brace on, and Wayne and Garth are playing street hockey, and she's like, "Hi, Wayne, hi." And she flips over the car and like just face plants on top of the car. It's one of the funniest moments in the entire movie, and he did not like it, did not want it in there.
It's so bizarre.
If anybody ever wants to brighten my day, just go ahead and send me that video, and it'll guarantee will perk up my day.
I had just two little short things. One, as a more personal note, was that when we were talking about how this movie kind of like entered into pop culture, and I remember when this movie came out just being so excited. I think I went and saw it 2 or 3 times in the theater, and one of the times I saw it at the mall. And then when I was in the mall, they had a Suncoast Video there, which I wish still existed. Maybe there's 1 or 2 around somewhere, but they certainly don't exist in St. Louis anymore. But in a Suncoast Video, I was able to buy a Wayne's World hat as well as the Monster Squad on VHS. It was an exciting day at the mall.
Oh my God, the same time. Whoa, that's awesome.
Pretty wild. And then my second thing is that in doing the research for Wayne's World, there was multiple mentions in several different interviews about how Mike Myers and Dana Carvey were real frustrated whenever Penelope Spheeris wanted them to do the headbanging for Bohemian Rhapsody at the very end of the song, which makes for a great scene, but they said that, it was like hurting their necks, and they just, I thought, being like pretty dramatic about the whole thing, because they were in every interview, they're like, "Oh yeah, for like the next 3 days, my neck still hurts from it to this day." And I was just like, gosh, these guys are like pretty wimpy about this whole thing. So then I tried doing just like rocking my head back and forth like I was headbanging. And headbanging, it's kind of like, if you're standing and you're like putting your head down, but in the movie, they're like sitting upright and kind of like banging their heads. And yeah, I did that for like 3 or 4 minutes. And I was just thinking like, yeah, there's no way I could do this like for like an entire day if we were shooting a scene. So yeah, I take back all those sort of like odious thoughts I had about Mike Myers and Dana Carvey.
And in the movie, yeah, you could look at that and be like, what? It was like 10 seconds long, but 10 seconds means an entire day they were doing that. So yeah, I'm sure they still got a lawsuit or 3 pending on that. But I do love these little factoids, little behind the scenes moments that we learned about this movie. I really enjoyed revisiting Wayne's World. It's certainly a movie that has not, even with all the cultural references, whether it's directly related to a movie or just of the time, it hasn't aged, and in the ways that it has, it doesn't really matter. I think you can still find the humor in it.
I like that, we've done like a month of comedies. We love our themes here at the podcast, and we've got we're cooking up something nice for December.
I mean, it's ending out the year. We got to do a big thing, right?
And we thought, what better thing to do than celebrate a national treasure and that's Miss Dolly Parton.
Dolly December coming at you.
We're going to start off Dolly December with Steel Magnolias.
Such a great movie. Tug at your heart, make you laugh while you're crying at the same time.
Yep.
Can't wait to talk about this one.
A lot to get into with that. Something to look forward to. Dolly December. I want to thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed our episode on Wayne's World. If you'd like to stay tuned, stay in touch, know what's going on with the podcast, you can find us on all your normal social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Actually, you can find many of our old episodes if you missed out on anything. We also do have an archive of all our episodes dating back to episode 0 at our website at don'tpushpausepodcast.com. There you can also find our merch store, where all the money that we make on merch goes toward helping us make a bigger and better podcast for our listeners' ears. So please do buy something from us. We totally appreciate it. If you'd like to contact us, just tell us how you're doing. Tell us what movies you're watching. Let us know if you liked an episode and why. You can reach us at don'tpushpausepodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Justin Johnson.
And I'm Lindsay Reber.
Thanks so much for listening.
Party on, guys.
Party on.